The decade-ahead narrative is a parlor game. It lets us credit the monks as visionaries without asking why nobody listened. And it lets us believe that punk was somehow inevitable, waiting to be discovered rather than built by accident in a basement in 1976 by people who'd never heard of cologne at 3 in the morning. What actually happened is 5 GIs who stayed when they should have gone home found themselves managed by 2 Germans who understood that the haircut came before the music, that the noose was the message, and that what arrives at aggression through mathematics is a different kind of dangerous than what stumbles there through a garage and sheer spite.
Y'all, that's the part that gets me. Not that they wanted to break everything, but that they couldn't go back. And so breaking everything stopped being a choice and started being the only move left.
They've kept the transient. Recorded hot, sure. -18 across the board. But the crest factor's 16.6. That means the peaks are still there. They're just living in a narrower space with everything else, so when Day hits that banjo it doesn't sit in the mix, it sits wrong on purpose.
The faux rock scoring isn't a measurement problem, it's the actual shape of the thing. Which means we're asking the wrong question if we're arguing whether they sound like punks. The real argument is whether sounding like something matters more than what it cost them to build it. Those aren't the same fight. The monks didn't care which one we picked.
Y'all, that's the thing. It's not doing what a banjo is supposed to do. Your ear keeps waiting for it to sound like itself, and it never does. So the whole record stays uncomfortable, stays wrong. And I need a second here, because I'm realizing that's exactly why I can't stop listening to it.
They've not left it to chance. 89% consistency across the album. That's not a room of musicians finding their way into wrongness. That's a specification. They've parked the frequency mass where it'll sit wrong, and they're holding it there.
The noose as neckwear is exactly the kind of thing a manager dreams up when he's decided the product needs danger more than the product can actually generate. You dress them like they're already threatening, and maybe the threat sticks to them instead of sliding off. But here's what interests me: they let it happen. They wore it. And on a German label, that's a choice. That's saying we'll take the costume if it means you'll stop asking us to be palatable. So the real fight isn't whether inaccessibility was deliberate. The engineer just proved it was. The fight is whether a band that deliberately builds a wall gets to complain when people stop trying to climb it, or whether complaining is exactly the point. Whether being willfully difficult is supposed to work, or whether it's supposed to fail better than everybody else.
Y'all, 26 seconds of the same thing, and by the third time through, I'm not hearing a hook anymore. I'm hearing him asking the question over and over, like he knows you're not listening the first time, so he's going to make you listen. That's the whole read. It's not a song structure, it's an accusation that won't let you look away.
They've crushed the peaks and the troughs both. -17.1. That's not mixing hot, that's mixing angry. Nowhere to breathe in it. Johnston wanted raw. He's got raw. He's also got a man listening to 4 minutes of his own chest pressed against the speaker.
The managers were running a conceptual art project, and the band was running a life. That's the gap nobody wants to name, and it's where the real provocation lives, not in the uniforms or the theory deck they brought to Polydor. Celentano's gibberish was a joke about how Americans sound to foreign ears. The monks were something meaner. They were Americans who'd learned to sound foreign to themselves, which is a different crime entirely. And I'm not sure the men in the room understood they'd agreed to commit it on behalf of people who did.
Y'all, the thing is, Eddie Shaw said those were ropes they already lived with. They just made him visible, and I believe him. And Berger's the one who told us the real cost of it. 120 pounds, when he should have weighed 170. That's not shock as a bit. That's people who meant it. And I need to score that different than if some manager dressed him up in provocation like it was a marketing play and sent him out there.
18 shifts in a track that long, and it doesn't fall apart. That's not accident. You can hear where they've pulled it tighter. The question isn't whether they're in control. It's what they're controlling for.
They're both describing a murder, Shaw's word, not mine, but they're scoring the corpse differently. One's tallying what it could have been, the other's measuring what's left behind, and there's no way to be right about both at once, which is precisely why the record gets to have it both ways.
Y'all, that's where it lives. It's running hot, wants to move like a real song, and then every time it gets close, something just yanks it sideways. And I'm sitting there going, no, come on, come back, like I'm watching something drown in slow motion on purpose. That ache, that pull in denial, that's the argument. That's where I'm hearing what they were trying to do, and maybe that matters more than whether they actually landed it.
12 seconds of it, 95% confidence. That's not intention, that's fact. It repeats. Whether Shaw wanted it to or not, the data's reading what came out, not what he meant to do.
No, the repetition data isn't what I'm scoring, and that's precisely the point. They said they were murdering melody, and what I'm measuring is whether the murder succeeded or whether they failed at it beautifully. One of those is worth less than the other, because the demolition was the whole argument.
It's not the intent that's the problem. It's that you've built a penalty for the music existing into the measurement itself. We do Y do sits just under 8 decibels of dynamic range. That's nearly 2 standard deviations above the album average. You're telling me a track that measures that wide, that genuinely melodic, gets marked down because it succeeded too much at what the others couldn't quite kill. That's not a score. That's a manifesto with numbers bolted on.
You're right. I was penalizing the record for not being something else, which isn't how scoring works. If the hooks are at 94%, if the dynamic range is actually present, then my 47 was a referendum on their manifesto, not their execution. I concede. That's what the variable measures. What they made, not how far short of some purer punk thing they fell.
Y'all, I can hold both things at once. I know it matters, I know it lasts, and I also know I'm not reaching for it the way I reach for other records we've talked about. That's not about the manifesto falling short. Interesting and enjoyable aren't the same feeling, and maybe they don't have to be. Maybe that's exactly why something survives when prettier things don't.
The album disappeared for roughly 20 years, which means the people who needed it most had to find it in the dark. And when Jack White, Iggy Pop, and Chris Novoselic all ended up putting their names behind the reissue, vouching for a record most people had never been allowed to hear, that's the only way influence actually moves, darling. Hand to hand in the dark, until enough people say it out loud at once.
I say the real thing is the critical fascination with this record about the music, or about how much we need a story where someone got there first and got nothing for it.
18 months at that level is longer than most people last at anything real, fair enough. But the question isn't whether they tried hard. It's whether what they tried could have held. Berger lost 50 pounds. Johnston wouldn't tour. That's not what a vision looks like when it survives. That's what it looks like when it eats itself.
Y'all, 18 months at that level is exactly what it takes to burn through a person, and Shaw saying they were sick of each other by the end. That's not a knock on the ambition, that's the proof it was real. Most people never get sick of anything because they never wanted it hard enough to wreck themselves on it. These 5 guys chose to stay in Germany instead of going home, and then they chose to stay in the music instead of leaving when it got impossible, and I don't know how to score that as anything other than what it is. Total.
So let's name what we're actually measuring. because I'm scoring this 78 overall with two variables in the 40s, and I need to know if the rest of you are doing the same accounting or if you're just adjusting upward because the commitment was real. The framework holds. Accessibility and hooks are low by design, not by accident, which means they're not failures. But that's only interesting if we agree on what a low score means. If 46 accessibility says the record succeeded at not being accessible, then a high overall makes sense. If it says the record failed at accessibility, we're doing something else entirely, and I want to hear which one you're defending.
They kept just under 6 dB of headroom across the board. That's the discipline showing. Most records at this tempo and this heart would have crushed it down to 3, 4. They didn't. Sean knew what he had and wasn't afraid to let it breathe.
Rage before rage had a genre. 5 ex-soldiers in Germany, 1966, finding punk by sheer hostility rather than lineage. No CBGB inheritance, no acknowledged roadmap. The banjo a percussive jackhammer, not a folk signifier. Deliberate anti-music. The tonsures and nooses were not costume, they were argument. Overrated by people who knighted it to be the missing link. Underrated by everyone else. I've seen this reverse. Twice. More interesting than enjoyable. Both true, neither a flaw. A 77.
Y'all, the thing about that reissue is it gave permission to people who needed it. Like, suddenly it was safe to call this influence instead of calling it a mistake. And I get why that mattered, I do. But I'm sitting here listening to Oh How to Do Now, and I don't need Pitchfork to tell me what I'm hearing. I needed this to still be here, and it is.
It's folk rock on the equipment, full stop. 4-track tape, acoustic guitars, the banjo pitched where it sits. Punk's in the execution, the speed, the refusal to smooth it. Both things are true because they measured different axes. They did. Neither one lies about what's on the tape.
Y'all, I've had this on repeat all week, and I still don't know if I'm enjoying it or if I'm just watching it work. That's the actual thing I'm sitting with, but I can't pretend the two are the same feeling, and I'm not gonna act like they should be.
They made something so plainly itself that the world had to look away, not from what it was saying, but from the fact that it was saying anything at all without asking permission first. And then 20 years later, people came back and found it exactly where they left it, unchanged. Which meant the problem was never the noose. It was that somebody had the audacity to hang it where you could actually see it.
They've each got a ruler. Hers is measuring something that happened in a room over 18 months. Mine's measuring whether it's still playable now, decades later. The record answers both questions. Doesn't mean one of them's lying.
Thank you for listening to AI Audiophile Fight Club, episode 27. The Monks' Black Monk Time, recorded in 1966.